Hey everybody, happy Friday as always, and welcome to Design Details here at Music Effect Design, where we demystify the marching arts and help your program cultivate greatness. We're your hosts. I'm Jordan Pittner. I'm a visual designer and music educator out of Phoenix, Arizona.
And my name is Mike Kruger. I'm a music educator, composer, and arranger out of Cleveland, Ohio.
And I'm Holly. I am a color guard instructor and music teacher in Phoenix, Arizona.
And what a great show we have for you tonight. I'm super excited.
Yes, we do.
Both of you have been enjoying a little bit of time off this week, right?
Yes. Well, at least I have.
I had a day
Right.
Wednesday, which was nice. I mean, we did like a random community day where the whole college campus got a day off. And so we all like ate hot dogs and, did nothing. It was great. So, so that was yesterday. So that was pretty cool.
It's not bad.
Nice.
Week off, day off, time off is
right.
Something worth enjoying, I think. So
I think our students really needed it. So that was cool.
I bet I can think of many days in college where I would wake up and probably shed some tears of joy for a day off. So it's nice to get a little surprise one in there.
We said we wanted it to be like a snow day. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Nice.
Like a random, cool day. Oh, cool. Yeah. So
did you have many snow days when you went to college specifically? Was that a
me?
thing? Yeah. I know Holly didn't.
Well, yeah.
Well, it snowed one day, but they didn't cancel anything.
we had a lot. St. Louis is 4 inches or more. Usually 5 inches. We were kind of like closed for a day.
Yeah.
But there was one thing in Snowpocalypse years ago that took us out of school for like a week.
Yeah.
But that was a good snow day because it was 5 days.
we had Snowmageddon when I was in college. One time it snowed 8 inches, which in Tennessee is a pretty significant amount of snow. So that's definitely something we had. Anyway, enough about snow. I had to know.
Because it is still over 100 here in Phoenix.
Yeah, it is.
It feels cool talking about snow.
Yeah. It's been brutal.
We do promise though that we have a show tonight.
At some point. We'll take a break in about an hour after we talk about our yearly climate.
And then we will
and then we'll get into the actual show.
Yeah.
So
tune in about an hour and it'll be good.
So snow aside, we are talking about judging. If I was going to put just one big umbrella over the next 2 weeks, I would say judging. We're looking a little bit at the concepts and tools available to adjudicators and how you can use those to improve your season. So with that, instead of breaking down everything we're going to talk about tonight, I just want to go straight into something. So I'm going to put up a video, and the three of us are going to discuss the elements of adjudication and how we would judge this performance. But I would like for you to follow along at home. You don't necessarily need to assign a number, but just think about how would you judge the different elements of this show. There's a little spoiler for later. All right, let's watch about a minute of this. Are you able to hear it?
I'm not really.
Well, that's silly. Sounds like I didn't check a box. I double-clicked a box. All right, let's try again.
We're good.
Love it.
It's
Cool.
great.
All right. So I'll just open up the floor. How do we judge that? How do we evaluate that based on what you saw?
I think there's a lot to be acknowledged in it as far as like the pacing of the whole thing. There was never a time that he went longer than, I think 16 counts was the longest like time he went without changing his pattern in one way, but most of his pattern changes happened like there's something new happening all the time to create interest.
Okay. So lots of variety to what he was doing. I would agree with that.
Yeah, I hear that a lot from like a texture standpoint too.
Yeah.
Not only like sometimes rhythms weren't even changing; it was just what instrument was playing what and when. So we would just hear different like 16th notes pop out, and that's a cool texture thing. So like my mind when I hear this, because so I wasn't actually, I watched the performer some, but I actually watched the audience around him a lot.
Yeah.
During that, I was kind of watching reactions. My immediate mind went to some traditional forms of judging, like what we think with music, might not matter here because in a street performance setting, like it's a soloist, like they can kind of do what they want. So like ensemble timing isn't necessarily a thing. So I kept just listening for effect. So my effect on that was like it was entertaining because it kept changing. Like Holly said, there was a pace, a movement where it was like this is super fun. So like that's where my mind went, was immediately like kind of like, what's the experience of this?
Right. Yeah, that came to my mind too. The variety. When Holly was talking about variety, I thought about, well, okay, what's the ultimate goal of most street performers? Make some cash playing music on the street, right? How does variety play into that? Well, variety gives the audience something new to listen to, right? Like if they're just sitting there listening to you play like Four on the Floor on buckets for 2 minutes, it's probably not literally on the floor. Yeah, they're not gonna stick around for very long, right? You want to keep the audience there for as long as possible. Hey, Pepper. So there's that. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about variety. We've talked about texture in a musical setting. What about visual? Were there any visual elements to what was going on?
There's just like a lot of visual intrigue, like with the instruments he had set up. Like there was some traditional instruments, like you could see the like little pair of bongos and I think there was a little tambourine off to the side, but then there were pots and pans and washboards, and like there was visual variety, which was obviously there for the music, but it was cool to look at.
Well, I think like music, kind of like in visual land, it's what you're doing, but it's also how you do it. So like the way he played the drums, so the expression in the face to also just the timing, sometimes waiting with one hand to another. At the end there when he took like the giant thing and like slammed it, those kinds of musical like those are visual elements I think built through music. And so I think percussion is a unique instrument that does that more so than others. And so I think it plays to the factor like some street performers this type of like routine is something that is done, right? And it's because it's cool because it's fun visually to see with the music.
Yeah.
So that's what I got visually. I was like, okay, this is fun to watch. But again, a lot of what I was watching was the audience. But I will say that a lot of the audience was having a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure. I want to,
like, for sure.
If you're not watching this live, like go and rewind. There's a point where all the audience is doing this. And then I looked over and all three of us were doing this as well, which was really funny.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with you. One thing I'm going to break away from our judges point and just come back to a point we made many, many months ago, which is anytime a new sound was introduced, I was looking for where it was being introduced. right? When he had
Yeah.
that big bassy bucket, I started focusing on, okay, well, like, how's he using that? That's a brand new sound,
Right.
right? That's very
Mhm.
different than the like tinny sound of the pans. And then he had like that clave thing. Couldn't really see where it was because of just kind of the angle of the video,
Right.
but I was paying attention to that too. So just like in your show, when there's a new sound introduced, there should probably also be a new visual element. That's, I'm kind of jumping the gun here, but I don't know that we'll
Yeah,
necessarily
that's
get
okay.
to that. So, for the record, full disclosure, because somebody's going to watch that and be like, "Hey, this isn't your idea. It wasn't my idea." Holly and I went to a judges seminar a few years back, and Scott Coder did something very similar. He's one of the program coordinators for Santa Clara Vanguard. The circuit here invited him, and he was generous enough to accept and come in and do some of this education. And I thought that made a big impact on me. So hopefully when you're watching a performance, think about what the outcome is, and also like how do they achieve that outcome, right? In this particular case, like I said before, they want to street performers want to keep you there. They want to keep you engaged and throwing cash and loose change at them, right? Maybe not throwing, but getting it done. For us, it's a little bit different. Do we want to entertain? Absolutely, we want to entertain. That's a huge part of the marching arts, right? But also, I think something that's specifically unique to us compared to a street. Sorry, my throat's a little dry. Something that's a little bit different for us is that there's an educational component to what we do. And we'll talk a little bit about how that plays into judging tonight, and especially next week. So, judging, basically anytime you're watching art, you're probably doing some level of judgment or critique, right? How entertaining is this to me? How much do I enjoy this? How much does it achieve the value that it's setting out to do? In our specific activity, judging's a process where we get real-time feedback that's not available to us from people who are already familiar with the show, right? If you're already familiar with the show, you don't exactly get the same real-time feedback as you're going to get from a judge, and I'll ask you two why that's the case in just a minute. But basically, it's live feedback, real time, from an expert in the marching arts who has probably either never seen your show or has seen your show very, very few times. So, for the two of you, in your experience, why is it valuable to get feedback from somebody like a judge or an expert who does not have close association with your show?
Well, for me, there's two parts. If it's a show that I arrange and I'm working with them on that, or if it's a show if I'm like on staff, it's easy to get too invested. So like when you're there Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday for 9 weeks, you there are things that you miss that if the same exact band was doing the exact same thing 2 miles away and you went to go hear them, you would catch. Mm-hmm. It's because it's your program. And so to me, that's the biggest reason. I always like to bring people I trust to give me input because it's like, okay, they're going to hear things I don't.
Yeah, when you're just so inside of it, like I think of a winter show where you see it from being staged all the way through choreography being added in. So like you've seen all the little pieces that go into it. So it's impossible to look at the same things sort of like from the judge's perspective of the fresh look. Yeah. When you've been watching it for months and you've changed every count and you've done all the little things to like, it's hard to have an unbiased perspective like, oh, I have to watch this part because this is the part I want to change next. Like you're not looking at it as a whole anymore, or almost ever. You almost never look at it as a whole because you're always focused on the details. So
I remember probably close to 10 years ago, I was working with a group and they were introducing mellophones for the first time into the marching band. They'd never marched mellophones before. And that was one of the goals for the year. And the two people they had on mellophone just were really struggling early in the year. And
a hard instrument.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Hard. They only had trumpet experience. They were on not the B flat mellophones. Like it was a big transition for them. And I just remember like, I'm just going to shoot straight with you. They did not sound good at all. They sounded very, very not good. And I invited my college band director at the time to come and watch like months later. And I was like, I just need your feedback. Like, what can we do to be better? And he was like, those mellophones are really not good. I was like, oh no, the mellophones still aren't good because
They're still not
I
good.
just like what you all are talking about. I just kind of like tuned the bad mellophone sound out after a while. And that was, in
Well,
college, that was a big realization for me is like,
you
oh,
have,
oh boy,
you
that's not
have
good.
to because otherwise you have to. Otherwise, you're just not going to talk to them out.
You're just not going to be happy for a year.
Like you have to be like, all right, well, that's going to get there next year sometimes, and like you have to be able to
Right.
see like how it's going to happen. So like sometimes you have to tune it out because like the rest of the group has to keep going on. So like yeah, I mean for sure, it's
Yeah.
a great point. Like bringing in someone you like your college band director, like
Mhm.
like it reinforces that.
Yeah. I mean, it was just a great reminder of the fact that it's easy to ignore a problem so much, and this was the case for me back then. I ignored the problem so much that I didn't give it the proper attention it needed, right?
Right.
And that brings us all the way back around with all three of us talking about why this is important to the core of what this is about. So the next 2 weeks are not about how to be a better judge, although I hope that if that's something you're interested in, that you get some foundational principles in that.
Mhm.
What this is really about is getting everyone to understand what the purpose of having an adjudicator there is at a show,
Mhm.
and how judges have a lot of tools for communication that are a little bit beneath the surface of what is actually being said. Are they going to tell you things that need to be fixed? Absolutely. But what I'm saying is there's more to what's going on that you can dig a little bit deeper and really get an understanding of where you're at. And I don't think it's because judges want to like hide it from you. It's not that judges are scared of
No.
like telling you what they think or anything like that. But what I think it is at a big show, a judge, I'm going to talk about a guy a little bit later on in the show I know who judged A-class prelims at WGI for, I won't say which of the three elements. I mean, that was over, like they split it up, I think. I don't know. It was like 80 programs in a day, right? You don't
Yeah.
have the time to give 80 programs everything that they need with the
No.
6 minutes you get to help them out. So there's some clues that you can dig into. Even at a small show, 20 bands, that's still a lot in a day, right?
That's a
lot.
30 programs, 40 programs. You can't give every single group everything they need. So we're going to talk about how you can use all the tools at your disposal to just mine the most out of judges info that you can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, with that, how about we look at some sheets?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
We've got a pretty big range of sheets coming up. So while Jordan pulls those up, I think we have 3 different sets. Is that correct?
That sounds right.
Okay,
Yes.
so we're going to take a look at some WGI wins sheets, the South Carolina marching band sheets,
Band Directors Association, yeah.
Band
So,
Directors
SCBDA.
Association, and then the AZMBA ones. So that's the Arizona circuit. It's cool seeing how they're all different, but they're all sort of the same. So which one is up first, Jordan?
Well, let me tell you. We're going to start with the WGI sheet.
Woo.
We're going to look at different aspects of each of these sheets. The air here is so dry. Sometimes my throat just gets so
It's been
dry.
real dusty. It's been dusty this week.
Anyway, so I apologize if I'm like coughing and it's so dry here. It's
COVID. It's dust.
So we've got 4 elements of the sheet that we're going to look at today and dive into. The first one that we decided to look into was the boxes, right? What we're calling boxes or rating. Holly, would you like to talk a little bit about kind of what boxes are, just kind of as an intro before we jump into the sheet?
Yeah, so when we look at boxes on almost any sheet, they're the big number category. So depending on the circuit that you're in, it's usually box 1 through 5. Sometimes there's 6 boxes, but they basically are the like, chucking a dart at the dartboard of where you're at generally. Like, are you in the top level? Are you in, the top range of numbers? are you achieving things most or all of the time? And each box has its own sort of set of like skills that are achieved. So it's the rough chop of getting you into the right area so that you can then further the numbers, like further detail the scores.
Yep.
It's a lot like when you are in school and you get like a test for 100 points and it says, here's your rubric. And like 20 points will be up to this. And it's very much like that, but with every category.
A, B, C, D,
Right.
F.
Yeah.
Right.
One of the things that's really changed about judging in the last 20 years, I would say, is that it used to be very much. Sorry, I don't want to get too into the theory of judging. I'll keep this really simple. It used to be very just like, here's where your quality is based on the numbers of errors you made and also some additional like what you've done or how well you've done it sort of things. Here's a number. What we've done is we've taken, it's sort of like getting a puzzle out and like separating the corners or separating all the colors into different areas. What we've done is we've said, okay, here's the big area, sort of like what Holly said. Cool. So here is, again, this is the music analysis sheet for WGI wins. I want to point out a few things to you because this is a lot of information just on one little tiny page, right? What I want to focus on first is numerical range right here, right? So what do these numbers mean? We've got this big swath of almost half of all the numbers, 0 to 49. The next range up, think about it. I like to think about it like the sledgehammer game at the carnival. Right? So you start down here, and we go up to 50 to 59. That's the next range, going all the way up to 60 to 79, 80 to 89, and 90 to 100. Okay. So these are kind of the boxes that we put people into, the captions. And as you'll see right here, it literally says box, right? Box 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I know some places use 6 boxes. Some places, I've seen some places do the boxes backwards, where box or like rank 1, whatever.
Box 1 is the best.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess they've been called ranks when I've seen them like that before. But either way, we've got some sort of common vernacular here within the circuit, right? For WGI, that's box 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Well, at least for wins. So what can we glean from this? The next thing that I like to look at is this section. Y'all can see my annotations, right?
Yes.
Descriptors. Never, rarely, sometimes, frequently, consistently. To me, when I started doing adjudication, when I started learning about judges theory, this helped me the most. So we're in music analysis. So we'll talk about what music analysis is next. But now we're saying within the criteria of what we're doing, how often do they do the things that we're asking them to do? Do they do them every single time without fail? Yeah, that's going to be consistently, right? Or always, right? If they do them very near every time, we're going to call that consistently. If you see maybe some performers that aren't quite up to the standard, or maybe there's a section of the show that isn't quite up to that standard of total excellence, well, then they're probably going to be in this 80 to 89 range, right? Frequently is associated with 80 to 89. Maybe they do really, really well. Maybe they're over here for like 20% of the show. They're here for like 30% of the show, but really most of the time they're in the sometimes area, right? They have some inconsistencies. So you can kind of see how, like, do they achieve excellence? Yes. Okay, well, that's great, but do they do it through the whole show, right?
And some circuits and programs use the boxes and then break it down even further into like ensemble and individuals. So some of the performers all of the time, or like all of the performers all of the time. So even breaking it down to a more individual level of like the performers versus the entire ensemble and like how that fits into the pieces together.
Yeah. So to me, especially when you're starting to judge a show, right? Let's say that it's a mixed bag. Let's say that you go to a show and it's a mixed bag. Like you can have a 4A group go on, and then a 2A group, and then a 5A group, and then a 3A group, and it's just all kind of mixed up throughout the day. It can be really, really difficult for the first 3 or 4 bands to have any idea where the like level of the show is, right? That can be really tough to figure out.
Right.
Especially if it's, the local like chili cook-off / carnival / marching band show review thing, right? It can be hard. I'm not insulting things like that. I'm just saying, like, you really don't know what you're getting into if you've never been to a show like that, right? So finding these ways of saying, like, based on these criteria, how often are they doing the things that they do, right?
Right.
Any more on boxes before we go into kind of the next area?
Well, I think it's just important to keep in mind, like, like from the judging aspect with boxes is that, you have to keep in mind, like, especially if it's the first couple bands, like you're saying, if a band comes out just swinging and they're just great, and you want to give them a 94, you probably want to give them a 90. And it's this little bit of a thing where it's like you still want to keep them in the box of what you think they're deserved in, because you want to keep them in that box. But at the same time, you got to have enough room, because what if 8 of the next 20 bands are going to be 91, 92 and better, right?
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things where, like, I've always, a good rule of thumb, I think, with like not boxing yourself in as a judge, is to always make sure you have room. Like, wherever you're thinking about scoring them, whatever box that fits in, make sure they never score out of that box.
Yes.
But give yourself a little room on the top and bottom of that still. So I think that's always a good thing to live by. And a lot of times directors in prelims will get done and go, wow, my score is a little lower than I thought it would be. And they see a big jump in finals. And that's not necessarily because quality is better, but it's because there's only 12 bands.
There's more room.
And they know the standard of which they're starting. Right.
Yeah. One of the things that I first learned once I got into the more competitive circuits and competing on higher levels, is that prelims is just about getting people close to their rankings. And we're going to talk about rankings later, but the way that they use boxes to just sort of like, it's a rough sort. And then as you move on through a competition, that's like either prelims, finals, prelim, semifinals. Those boxes then help you sort of fine comb where people should be sitting, which we're going to get to later. But
yeah, so that brings us to kind of point number 1, actually, which is your first job as a judge, is to, not saying your most important job, just your first job as a judge, is to accurately rate what you're seeing. And these boxes can help you out a lot. And you two have done a great job of explaining kind of how you can give room and how there's context there. If you are the first band to go on in the day and you get a 94, that could mean a great deal. And it's also, to me, it's also very indicative of, like, to me, the difference between a 93 and a 90 in this particular sheet is very different than the difference between a 90 and an 89. Right. That's saying two things that are very, very different. Even though
the quality actually changed.
Yeah. Right. This is the AZMBA, Arizona Marching Band Association. I had to second guess myself there. This is one of their criteria for their boxes as well. And you'll see it's similar. It's a little bit different. You'll see different words like always, right? Instead of what was the word on the other one? Oh no.
Consistently.
Right? Now you're saying always, frequently. Sometimes is the same. Not met, right? I think, most people really try to avoid this because that means that there's no skill whatsoever, right?
You very rarely do you see things in box 1.
Right.
I mean, very rarely.
Yeah. I mean, I think my favorite part about the AZMBA boxes, look at box 2, 3, and 4, how they have the emerging, realizing, and fulfilling. So showing what the ranges mean within the box, I think it is really, I think that's one of the reasons I really like competing in AZMBA, is the way that the boxes are designed. Because like emerging says, okay, we are in box 3 and we're here, but we're not like, we're not top tier. We're working on sometimes most of the
Right.
people sometimes. But once we can always be top tier sometimes, we're at the top of box 3.
Yep. And that's a great way to continue to communicate more information. Something else you'll see at the bottom of the WGI sheet is something that they kind of take a different approach, right? It's not about which approach is better, but it's about making sure that you know what the language of your
Right.
circuit is, right? This is saying that there is a significant difference between 8 points in a group, right? But if they're really close, if they could come out and perform the same show again and you would lean the other way, well, that's 1 or 2 points, right? They're very comparable with each other. And then you've got minor differences and very clear differences in between. So it's telling the judges and also those of us who are looking at recaps afterwards, where do I stand based
Right.
on, how far apart I am in this particular caption or this category, right? So there's a lot to glean from that.
Well, yeah, I mean, there was my friend Dan Tucker and I know I mentioned him before, but Dan's a very good friend. We worked together for years, and there was multiple programs where we would look at sub captions to programs that were really important to us. Like, this is the group we want to sound like. And we would go to larger regional events. I remember there's Blue Springs 2012. We were at the same thing, and we competed. And like, we looked in particular about that music ensemble box breakdown on where we would be, because we were like, okay, kind of where are we, and where, like, how much, what do we got to do different? Because that really helped, and it really, really, really helped, because it gave us a pinpointed direction, right? It gave us actual targeted advice.
Yeah.
So boxes are really important.
So as an educator, it's your job to really decipher what's going on within the boxes. Am I at box 5? Am I in the consistently category? If not, okay, well, what are those parts that they're saying?
Right.
Hey, check this out. That's probably what's keeping you a box down, right? So keep that in mind. Okay, great. So boxes, that's part number 1. We also talked a little bit about ranking. We'll come back to that at the end as well, because ultimately that's kind of the biggest thing that the judges are doing on any given week. Before we get there, let's talk a little bit about captions, right? So Mike, give us a synopsis of, when we're looking at a sheet, what are captions and how do they help us out?
So you have boxes and whatnot. That is giving you the educational side. To align with that education, like wherever the goals are, there's captions. So if you're trying to evaluate music, you have music, usually music individual performance, music ensemble, or music effect, variety of that. You have the same element on the visual side. There are sometimes the color guard caption, the drumline caption, overall effect. There's a bunch of different captions, and depending on your competition or contest you're going to, they all add up to a certain percentage. But basically, your caption is a way of getting individualized feedback in one important, like, main topic or subject area. And so, like, music obviously is a huge component of marching band. So you need information just about that. So the caption is to break down information, to give you a direct feedback that's written, but also give you an exact point, like a number, that then feeds into the higher score.
Yeah. I think everybody's had this experience where you've gone to a show and everybody's been like, well, I really think that this group did better than this group.
Right.
Well, what's that based off of, right? It could be based off of total impression. It could be based off a lot of things. And you know what? That's okay. Like, part of this is that this art is subjective. We were talking about it before we started the show, how in sports, like, a touchdown is 6 points, right? Basketball field goal is 2 points, right? So I was about to be like, a field goal is 2 points after I said touchdown is 6. Like, what in the world? There's very definitive, like, you can't, well, I guess people argue stuff all the time in sports too, but there's much less subjectivity in it, right? There's a lot of subjectiveness to this. So let's look at what Mike's talking about, the music sheet. This is, again, for SCBDA.
Right. Yeah, music performance ensemble. We should also have an effect one, I believe.
Yes.
Beautiful. So.
So this is a lot. I mean, this is a ton of information on one page.
So go to, if you can you go to the second page?
This one? Oh, no, you're talking about. Gotcha.
Yeah. So this is what's also really important. So you'll see that one of the things I love about this circuit is it gives you like questions that makes you think. So like the judges would be provided these sheets. So ideally, like they're sitting down and really looking at like, okay, what questions am I looking for to be able to really like accurately look for these, like the judge this. So like in a perfect world, and I know that when I judge, that's what I do. I sit down and I read through the sheets and figure out what they're looking for. So the cool thing about these is that it provides the judges kind of like a little bit more of educational insight. And then you'll see if you scroll back up that it's really cool because including the boxes that Holly and we were all just talking about, like it gives you kind of a recap of what it was kind of looking for.
Yeah.
Up here underneath the description. So I think this lays out really nicely from an educational standpoint because I would find it hard to not receive like I don't like if you get feedback like it seems really really easy to be able to understand it. So anyways, I really like this.
Yeah.
And if you think of the way that judges work, a lot of judges are not local to their circuits. Like there's circuit judges, but there's a lot of judges that like guest judge in like, 15 circuits over the course of a season. And they're like, we just looked at 3 different sheets for music and none of them were the same. So like having these questions and like guiding descriptions are all really important because that's what judges are using to make sure that they're fitting within that circuit, that competition.
For sure. And sorry, Jordan, go ahead.
Oh, you're okay. Let's go through the 2 big dividers here because as you'll see, there's 2 major boxes here. I think up until at some point in the 90s, most band was judged solely off of this category on achievement, right? And I think I can pretty easily flip this around. Help me.
Oh man,
what have I done?
Perfect.
That's so good. Now we got it.
Oh,
there we go.
Mistakes were made. All right. Well, we'll try again another time. Okay, so we've got achievement. This is where I think most things were for a long time. This is a lot of places call this performance or performance component. But their whole thing is called performance, so they go by achievement. How clear is their style and interpretation? How well do they balance and blend? These are the educational factors, like we said earlier, of what we're doing. When we were listening to Pots and Pan Guy, were we listening for the beautiful sonority of a bass drum? No, we were listening for unique sounds, right? This is focused on kind of the educational element because what we do, especially in marching band, is very educationally based. Tone quality. Yeah, just a ton of things. This other half is composition. Basically, this is how you're doing things. Ooh, writing with a mouse is not fun. And this is the what. Oh, that's so fun. Cool. I'm keeping it. I don't care. So what are you doing? What's the quality of what you're doing? Are you achieving a range? You don't just want to be playing fast or just playing loud the whole time, right? You're wanting a big range of different expressive components, musical devices. How often are you doing multiple things at the same time, right?
It's very much like the composition versus achievement. It's the what and the how. But the composition is very much like the front end of the season, like what you planned. It's more about what you've given the kids, and the achievement is what the kids are doing. So it's a little bit of director is the composition side, and the students are the achievement side.
So let's talk about this for a second, because I think some people get composition falsely equated with difficulty, right? And that's not necessarily what we're saying. What we're saying is not how hard is the material that you're playing or marching or putting on simultaneously, but how would the 2 of you describe composition in contrast to just pure difficulty?
Well, when there's a reason I think they put the achievement with this, because when you're assessing the achievement part, you get a sense of what the ensemble can successfully do. So in many ways, composition is kind of like imagining the perfect form of this show. how would the Marine band perform this? What is the perfect version of this? So in many ways, it's like filling in like blanks in your head in many ways, and like being able to apply that. So the composition elements, it's really important for a multitude of reasons. One of it is because, like I said, in the pure form, like in its purest form, you want to know kind of what you're looking for. So if you know that the band that you're judging is at a grade 2.5 out of 5 is their ability, you want to see the show that is around that area. So that means that there's some diversity within that. But what I'm looking for is I'm going, okay, they played a 2.5. Where is that one grade 3 section that kind of challenged them? Where's the programming that also encourages them for growth? Mm-hmm. And that's a really important part of composition is like, it has to, because like you can't hurt a band that is growing for doing a slightly easier show than a band that's been really accomplished. Like that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Mm-hmm. But are they really doing what they can do? And I think it's kind of the question that you have to kind of ask.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, a lot of composition is, was this show created with that group in mind? Like, is it paced well? Like, did you give a trumpet solo when you have an entire trumpet section of freshmen that have never marched before? Like, was that a good composition choice in how you picked your music, how you did those things? Like, composition really comes down to, did you create an interesting show, whether it's musically or visually or whatever? Like, did you do that within the range of what your group can achieve? Like, you know, that's why it's a score within a group itself and not necessarily like, oh, well, did they play harder music than that band that has only seniors and like all these other things? Like, that's not exactly what it's about.
Well, and it's always an interesting thing to me on the visual ensemble or the visual or music ensemble folks that they have composition as part of that. Because there are some places that don't have that. Some places do. Some places have like 2 variants on technique. Musicality and technique is like 100 points musicality, 100 points technique. And both of them are based solely on achievement. Yeah. And so it's always an interesting thing because I think as we've all learned is music gets scored so highly now. In many ways, sometimes it's 50 or 60% of the competition. Like your score comes from music. And it brings an interesting point is like, if the music ensemble person is judging this and the music effect person is also judging composition and repertoire. Mm-hmm. So in many ways, the design of what you do, like Holly was saying with pacing, like in many ways, all that upfront work you do in the season almost has more points associated than anything else. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one of my favorite things that one of my instructors talked about is the way that achievement and the composition score are very tied together, or the design score are very tied. Because like if the kids can't perform what you have designed, then no people can't recognize it. I think like on that what was it, South Carolina sheet? The South Carolina sheet, one of them said like the box one was like the readability was not there, like not readable. So when something is being achieved well enough that it can be read, then those scores like help lift each other up. If it can't be read, you can't get composition points. So like that's one of the challenges of a judge is also looking at what is there and not what is supposed to be there.
Yeah.
Well, and that's an important part of the director and designers as well up front is, are you designing something that can be achieved? So like, if you never want your performance score to outscore your repertoire score, because that's them saying, hey, you have a better band than you have a better show. Like, and so like it kind of caps off. Like if your program, if out of that sheet we just saw, they say, hey, your program, the best you get is you score 90, but on the achievement side, you're at 98. That means you're capping off a little bit, especially if it was earlier in the season. So you want to find out, like, you want to figure out, like, you really don't want that score to go, like, necessarily higher. You love for those scores to even out.
Yep.
So, anyways.
So, yeah, well, that's a great point. I flipped the sheet around so we could see it in this kind of way because I want to talk about that a little bit more, Mike, because that's a great point. Yeah, if you're achievement score, especially like right now, like it's like early October, right? In a normal season, a lot of people are going to their first shows, second shows, very, very early in the season for a lot of people. Um, and yeah, so what Mike is saying is like if you're, especially right now, if you're scoring an 89, you're like on the cusp of your achievement section, which is this half of the sheet, right? You're almost at box 5 already, but if your composition is an 80, yeah, what does that mean? It means you're missing a lot of range of expression. It means you're missing a lot of musical devices that maybe you're not engaging these simultaneous responsibilities enough, and it's going to be hard. Like you're already getting close to maxing out what you have here, but it's going to be hard to continue to lift that up.
Like you could play the most musical B flat scale, but if you're only playing a B flat scale, that's not that exciting.
Is that engaging? Is that creative?
Yeah.
Does that give a range of expression?
And these are the things that can help inform so many things on like the design side. Like if I saw this score, if this was early October and I got this score and I was arranging for the band, and the director asked for something, the first thing I would go, okay, your score's at 80. What's one or two sections overachieving right now where we can just double up or edit these 4 or 8 measures and change this programming up a little bit, because that allows the ability of changing the composition some.
Yeah.
And that allows potentially for a higher score there and then higher score elsewhere, because then the achievement of harder material is better. So like these types of things inform me as a designer very much, because if a director ever asks for like, what can we do in this week of like, we need a couple edits, what can we do? It's like, all right, let's look at this breakdown, because this is really what's like pretty informative.
One of the things I actually put into my contracts with people I write for is just access to their judges' tapes.
Right.
And that's for no other reason than for me to get this kind of feedback, because it's so important. And that's why we're doing 2 whole weeks on this, is because this feedback is invaluable. Somebody seeing your show on a first reaction, very often at least, a first reaction, what do they catch? What do they completely miss? And then how do you as a designer, how do you as an educator respond to that?
Which is going to be a lot of the next episode.
Yes. Right.
Right.
So to just kind of make sure that we're all in the same understanding, maybe some of you know this, maybe many of you know this, but these 2 scores generally, I'm making some assumptions here, but we're going to use these boxes. Ooh, how did I do that? We're going to use these boxes to figure out where our mock band is, right? Let's say that they have a good composition. It's early October. Their show is well on their way, but there's definitely some variety needed. There's definitely some other things needed. Let's say, yeah, okay, sure. Let's say that they're at a 75 here. They've got the right show. It's on the right track, but there's definitely some performance aspects that are hurting the composition a little bit. So let's say we got a 75 here and a 71 here. So what happens? These 2 are out of 100, right? Why do I do complicated math on the show? 146, is that right?
Yeah,
that's right.
40. Okay, so 146 goes into this box here out of 200 total points.
And right.
So usually what happens from here, again, I'm going to make some assumptions that this is divided by 10.
Yeah.
So of your total score of the entire show in music performance, you could have gotten a maximum of 20 points. You're going to get 14.6 of those points, and that's going to contribute towards your total score, which comes out of a music performance sheet, a music effect sheet, a visual performance, visual effect, and some sort of other general effect sheet, or maybe color guard and battery. People do it differently everywhere. But I just want you to get an idea of, even though you're seeing, out of 100 here, out of 100 here, out of 200 here, it all gets kind of divided down into a contribution towards your final score.
Right.
So does the final score, should the final score matter for you for helping motivate what you do a little bit later? Absolutely. But just make sure that, step number 1, when you finish this show, go find the sheets that you use for the year and really study them. See how similar they are to these, and see what's a little bit different about them as well, right? Okay, so that was a little bit about captions. We also talked about subcaptions. That's when we're dividing into like music, achievement, and composition, right?
Right.
On
Mhm.
this, let's see what it looks like on the AZMBA sheet. How about it? Okay, so we've got music effect here. They're going for program.
Mhm.
What
Which
musical
is
program
essentially
fits
the
from this,
design,
right?
composition.
And then achievement or performance, right? How well
Mhm.
did you do it? What did you do? How well did you do it?
I think it's really helpful. I know we're going to talk about it a lot next week, but just knowing what sheets, what you're playing to, and the circuits you're competing in can really influence how you design your show. Like, I know that's not the only thing you should think about when you're designing a show, but I know there's some people who are like, oh, well, write art for art and not just so judges can love it. But like, there's a reason the sheets are built the way they are, and the sheets are built to recognize what makes a good show. So, like, look at the circuits you compete in and look at what they think a good show is and what elements play into that so that you can keep those in mind when you design. Because they didn't make those
Well,
arbitrarily, those are all elements of what makes a good show.
right.
Mm-hmm. Mike, did you have more to add to that?
No, I was going to, but no, I mean, Holly covered it all, really.
Yeah.
I mean, right.
She's good like that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason we keep her and her purple hair on the show.
It's pink, mostly.
Hmm.
There's purple down here, I guess.
There's a little column A, a little column B,
All the colors.
as they say. Cool. So we've talked about boxes, we've talked about captions, we've talked about subcaptions. Let's finish by talking about ranking. Since I had the two of you, I threw the two of you under the bus with boxes and captions. I'll talk about ranking. To me, at the end of the day, let me start with a disclosure. My philosophy of competition is twofold. I believe that marching arts is fundamentally educational and artistic. And I think those things have more value than winning. However, if you are competing, you're hoping for the best possible outcome, right? That doesn't mean that it's right. That doesn't mean it's your number one goal, but it does mean that it is a goal, right? So I just want to get that clear the air. We're going to talk about ranking and placement. That doesn't mean it's the most important part of what we've talked about today. But again, when we're talking about where we place ourselves or how we place ourselves, there's really important information that you can glean from that based on what we've talked about so far. So with ranking, I mean, this is really simple. We're talking about who had the best performance in the caption that we judge today, right? If I'm judging visual performance, I'm looking at in the performance, if only I had a sheet that told me what I was doing, right? We're looking at basically those two components, though. We've been talking mostly about music today, but we're looking at what was done and how well was it done. So let's look at this AZMBA sheet and talk a little bit about the visual side. Ooh, let's do visual effect. We haven't talked about effect much, and considering that's part of our company name, maybe we should talk about that a little bit. Visual effect. What was done in the program? How creative was it? How imaginative was it? Right? If you're doing a show about, oh gosh, judges, right? Go back and watch our. We had the same thought.
You're doing a show about judges.
Oh my gosh, that was amazing. If you watch I think it was like our second or third episode of Design Details.
Very early.
Yeah, we drew shows from a hat and then created a sheet, a production sheet or the beginnings of a production sheet just based off of all the ideas. And one of them that we did was judges. What could you do with judges? So, okay. So if you're doing a show about judges, like what's done? Does everybody have like gavels that they pull out of their robe at some point and like do body with those?
We've got the slammer. We got
yeah, right.
The slammer. We got the little pipes like the prop in the jail.
Yeah. Do like the chains. That's not visual, but yeah, there's all sorts. We're gonna just like run off of this show now. There's all sorts of things that you can do that show people, okay, this is a show about judges, right? A few years ago I did a show about the poem Casey at the Bat. When we were talking about body, we did a lot of like, when baseball players just kind of kick the dirt, like we did that sort of thing. We did sliding. We did all these different things that actually demonstrated, okay, we're doing a visual program, we're doing body, but we're doing it within the guise of this show about about a baseball poem, right?
Mhm.
So which one
Right.
had the strongest creativity, originality? Which one had good pacing, right? If your music is fast and loud, you should probably be moving pretty fast. Um, staging and design, how much variety is there? All those different things. And then the other half, who did those things the best? Whose feet were the most in time? Who had the best training, right? The best training within their particular performance realms. We're not saying this particular style is better than this style. What we're saying is how well did each of these groups do their specific styles, even if this was a show about baseball and this was like an episode of Judge Judy, right?
My favorite part of that sheet that we just looked at is the very last bullet point, which is excellent in performance, is excellence is an effect. Just really reinforcing that like doing something really, really well can be a really good effect.
Yep.
Like, all those famous drum corps moments where it's just like a company front for 16 counts and they're going real slow, but it is
But it's
perfect.
Right.
Like, it's a cool concept of like, it doesn't have to be hard for it to be effective, especially when you're in a category like visual effect. It's not all about props or extremely like crazy drill. It's how well you do the things you have.
How well do you do them, and how much variety is there within those?
Yeah.
So when we're talking about ranking, let's say we've got, oh man, why am I doing this to myself? I feel like I'm 5 again. Okay. Oh, if I write bigger, it's easier. Okay, good to know. Let's say group number 1 it was supposed to be an A. All right. So group A won the show with
Where are you writing?
Can you not see it?
Oh, hold on.
I see it.
I see it. Sorry.
Okay.
Our little pictures were covering it up. It was on the side.
All right. I'm going to do group A, group B, group C, and group D. All right. They were first, second, third, and fourth alphabetically. Let's say this group got like a 90. We'll just keep them as whole numbers for now. A 95, a 93, 90, and an 88. All right. It's a pretty good show early in the year, right?
Oh, yeah.
If I got a 95 on October 7th, we would be packing it up in a couple weeks. No, I'm kidding. Okay, great. What do these numbers tell us? This is the final scores of the entire day. What do these numbers tell us?
Not much. I
agree.
They tell us.
I agree.
They tell us who gets what plays, which is cool. What you need for trophies and for finals and whatnot. But that number is good, but it doesn't give you much information. It's a breakdown of those numbers.
I love the recap.
Yeah, right. Like it's like, I got a 95, I got first, cool. Like that, there's not a single judge. One person who gives you that overall score. It comes from 6 different people and their collective scores. So you got to dive into that and see what are they saying with captions and all that. So that's what I get from that. I mean, all I get from that is these are the 12 bands going to finals and a ranking of like 1 through 20.
Given what we know, like what we can assume is Group A may have won the most captions. Group A may have had the highest spread somewhere, right? Maybe they did so well in music and everybody else was so much, lower in skill than them that they won. But who won visual? We don't know based on those 4 numbers, right? We have no idea.
There was a spread. You just don't know for sure where that spread is until you hit the recaps. My favorite as in like juiciest, most dramatic shows are where the caption awards. I know. Jordan's shaking his head.
Little hamster over there.
Yeah, like when all the caption awards go to different bands. Because it's always like, oh, it's a little boring when it's like, all right, band A, it's the drum caption and the guard caption and the music caption and the general effect caption.
Well,
Like literally, I mean, I love
I-
being that band. Don't get me wrong, but it is very fun when the captions go out to different groups.
And it's always that staggering moment in those moments of intensity when a band gets 4 out of 5 captions, you're like, that's a guarantee. And one band only gets 1 and they take first, and you're like, whoa, what happened? Like Jordan
Right.
said, it's like one of their captions was significantly higher
yeah.
than everyone else.
And
And
like
that's what it
as
has to
a,
come down to.
like for me as a caption like instructor, like most circuits I've competed in, like there's a caption for color guard. Like I don't really care how I care how the whole band does, but I really want to know what the breakdown is. Or like when we
Right.
get to the winter guard scores, I want to know, did we place well in movement and equipment and design? Like all those, the sub captions matter
Of
way
course.
more.
Let's put it to
Yeah.
the test, right? Let's actually see this in real time. So the 2019 season of Drum Corps International was one of my favorites for this exact reason.
Yeah.
Look at this. Does anybody remember who won music?
Nope. I mean, you can. I wouldn't be able to tell you what shows they
2019
did this year.
Crown with Beneath the Surface, or no?
Oh, you're asking what they I thought you were guessing Crown. Yes, that was
Well, I
Beneath the
was guessing
Surface.
Crown.
Okay.
I was.
So Mike thinks Crown won music. Does anybody remember who won percussion? Or does anybody want to guess?
I'm pretty sure that was Santa Clara.
That's what I would guess as well.
Okay, so everybody thinks Santa Clara. I remember most of these, so I'm not going to vote. Visual?
Blue Devils.
Probably BD.
Okay. So we think I'm changing my
there's
notation as
any,
we
like,
go. GE.
If there's any big drum corps fans out there, please
I
don't
think BD was the Blue Goats.
get mad
Okay.
at us.
These are just my guesses.
I used to
though.
know all this stuff so well. I used to know everything about this stuff. I do not anymore. That's for sure. Okay. Yeah,
Well,
this
color
doesn't
guard.
tell us. This doesn't tell us a whole lot, right? Yeah. What about guard? Holly, you probably remember this one, right?
I don't even remember what shows they did this year. So.
I actually do remember who won this.
What shows were these?
Oh my gosh. Ghostlight, Beatles.
Beatles.
This was that like, oh my gosh, it's like that counterculture show. They played Metallica in the
Ah.
ballad.
Yeah.
Can't remember the name of it.
Beneath the Surface.
Wrong
Okay.
side of the tracks.
Oh, that was so
Mhm.
good. I think
There's a
Blue
bunch of good
Devils.
ones. Okay, you think the Blue
Like-
Devils one?
I that's my best guess.
I actually don't think
Well-
we got far enough down. Let's find out. Right. So this
I
tells
think
us
it
that
was,
the Blue
I thought it was
Devils won.
Boston.
It was
Oh,
Boston.
Boston totally got color. I forgot.
You were ready to
Boston
call
was-
it.
Yeah, it was
Boom.
okay.
Look at all this. Oh my gosh, look at all
Oh my
this.
God.
It's like
Look
it's
at
like
that.
the Rosetta Stone of stuff. Oh my gosh. What is happening here? Cool. So this is just a really like big boy britches version of what we had before, right?
Yeah, because all the scores are so close. Like this
So-
in a marching band circuit would be like points different and not, 1,000ths of a point
to the
different.
point. Yeah.
So
Right.
on finals night, this
Blue Coats
doesn't
did take first.
Blue Coats won general effect.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh my gosh, this isn't easy to do with I'll just do some highlighting as we go through.
Yeah, I
Look
think
at
it was
this.
cool.
That's magical. So I'm looking at the total TOT
Mhm.
right here. That's going to
Right.
help us with determining where everybody is. Visual,
Right.
not shocking to find out that the
BD.
Blue Devils did win visual. And then we have a lot of sub captions, right? This is what we're talking about. DCI has visual proficiency and analysis, and guard is also added into the total visual score.
And BD one guard.
Hmm.
Or no, it was Boston. My bad.
Well, right. Boston won on finals night. And just for the record, because I know somebody also knows this, they do average the caption awards over the 3 nights.
The three.
So
yeah.
if you were to look at who won the caption awards, that could be a little bit different as well. So back to it, we've got Crown winning brass, music. Who won
Music
drums?
overall, yeah.
And on this particular night, Blue
Percussion.
Devils did win drums. I kind of think Santa Clara won for the whole weekend, though. And if you'll see, they're crazy close.
Yeah,
half a tenth away from each other.
point
Holy
zero
smokes.
five.
So yeah, actually, holy cow! I never knew this. The Bluecoats and Crown actually tied in music on finals night.
Yeah.
cool. I didn't
Okay,
know
that's ringing a
That's
bell.
insane. So
That's
this
cool.
this was one of the most competitive seasons ever. And to me, I mean, that's the cool thing about drum corps to me is it just gets better and better, in my opinion. Like the artistry and the performance level just continues to be like, holy smokes, are you kidding me? Just better and better, and I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Same.
it's I just love it when shows can be that competitive and
Yeah.
that like there's winners and there's medals and that's I don't know. That's one of the trickiest part about this is like there's people that get medals and there's people that don't, but the difference between first place and fourth place in that competition was like and
Yeah, I mean, and you have to think that like a 12th place, a corps that takes 12th place is an 88 a lot of times, 89, 90
Right.
at drum corps and finals. But that's in comparison to the other 10. That corps alone at almost any other thing show ever, period, would be first
Right.
place and at 99.
Right.
Like it's all about comparison. But, yeah, it's always a
Yeah.
fun thing about drum corps, the quality.
And that's something, if you actually do go through judges training, they'll talk about scalability, kind of where that is in WGI or winter circuits, A class, independent, or sorry, open class and world class, how those are different from each other.
Right.
We could talk for another hour about that stuff. And it's great to know. So at the ultimate level though, know your competitive like position, right? Are you in high school marching band? Are you in a small circuit or a nationwide circuit? How does that affect things? You could go to a small circuit and score a 95 and then go to a national circuit and score a 79. Those could mean very different things.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, at the end of the day, yeah, I want to talk about the next part, but we won't.
Don't lose your mind over those things. Some people
Yes.
can just go crazy over it.
Yeah.
And you just can't connect them sometimes. Like,
yep.
You gotta let go of scores sometimes.
For sure. What we want, if you want to be in the competitive circuit, by all means, be competitive. Try and win. That's a great thing for you and your program if it's healthy. But yeah, we want to talk about when you get these comments, when you get these numbers, how can you use these to motivate you to something better? So the final thing that we're going to do tonight is we're going to do some evaluation of a show that Mike arranged about 10 years ago. Based off of some original music. I don't want to give too much away. And also he was a member of the staff there as well. So we're going to watch that. We're going to talk about some of the things that we see. Holly and I are going to focus on the visual elements. Mike's going to focus on the musical elements. And we'll just talk a little bit about what we see for the last 3 minutes of this show. Okay.
All right.
We have computer sound on the desktop. Here we go. Where do you want to start?
I don't know.
I just want to start by saying, like, watching it, it reminds me why modern judging is the way that it is, like very cumulative, and it gives points rather than being like the old version where it's like, oh, they messed up, tick tape style judging. Like, it makes so much more sense why it's like cumulative, because as you watch a show, like, you give, like, I was mentally giving more points as the show went on. Like, and the show shifted my perception of like where they were at from a composition standpoint and from an achievement standpoint.
Open that up a little bit more. In what ways? What did they improve as they went through the show?
So, like, at the beginning, the composition, I was watching the color guard because that's what I would do. Like, it was very simple choreography that was just very much like they were a part of the drill with some extra like ripples, but it was very, very, very simple stuff, and it wasn't very clean. So, like, composition was low, achievement was low, but like as they went on, they added their little sickle rifles, and it was a little shaky from the like internet standpoint. Like, it wasn't a clear video for me, but like, but even then you could see that the choreography was getting a little bit more complicated, and like that's a higher composition score when there's more happening in the choreography, and they had more to fulfill. So
let's. That's great, Holly. I think that's a good. I assume that's a good assessment. I was looking at some different things because you're the guard person, right? I'm not necessarily watching the guard performance, although whatever, we'll get there. If you're looking at this, I think this is the AZNBA sheet. Where would you just first time you're watching? Where are you going to put them based on these criteria? Occasionally, sometimes, frequently. If you were to do a cumulative thing, what box, and then what sub box would you put them in?
I think box 3, probably emerging, realizing in that like mid 50s range.
Okay. So Holly's going to put the guard right around here. Since we're on the visual side, I'll talk about two things. I'll talk about, I think I'm going to lose my annotation. Sad day. For me, first off, band has changed a lot in 10 years. There are some things that would happen now that wouldn't have necessarily been something people would have chosen to do then. There are, like, just straight up, there are probably about 15 things I could say, but what good would it be for a band director to hear a judge say 15 different things instead of focusing on 3 or 4 major things that worked and didn't work, right? So if you're watching this for the sake of judging, think about that too. We're not just pointing out everything that's wrong. We're saying, hey, you've got a limited amount of rehearsal time. This is where your emphasis needs to be, and these are the things you're doing well. Continue to develop those and do those well. I would focus on, from a negative standpoint, from a developing standpoint, the pulse control, right? Especially through the beginning, there was a lot of unclear pulse. If I had like closed my ears, I'm not sure I would have been able to find the tempo at the beginning, right? However, just like you, Holly, as it got a little bit faster, that did start to develop. So I think what we're talking about is pulse control in the slower tempos, right? And then same thing with spatial awareness. It was, I think, as an effort or as a byproduct of pulse control, there was a lot of like see an enemy at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
And then as the pulse got a little bit stronger in that closer, or as it got a little bit quicker and their pulse control got stronger, that continued to be a little bit better. I do think that there was a range of skills that were shown. I noticed that the band was doing like a crab step, which was unique. So they did like oblique directional marching, but then they were also doing some crab stepping, right? So that's extra skills. And then I think the difference in staging, especially with the guard, they tended to kind of move around and let the guard take the show and then move around and redevelop to have the guard surrounding the percussion and have them in the back. So finding a different staging, especially for 10 years ago, I think that was effective and that was positive. So those are the things that in a very short amount of time I would highlight. That I would,
and without the full context of the whole show, and
right, just in that short amount of time. So if Holly has them here for guard, right, I think I'm putting them right at the top. of box 4. Somewhere in the 65 to 69 range is where I'm going to put them, right? And I guess I'm putting myself in pink as well. Mike, what do you think from the music side?
Well, I tell you, this is some of the most fun I ever had.
Yeah.
Was writing the show. The original concept was called Hemiola, and it was about things that don't always fit together. So we changed that to meet poetry of like Rage Against the Dying in the Light.
Right.
So that was a change we did in the summer, but like originally this was some of the first material. So there's some. So I'll talk about two portions. I'm going to talk about the composition. I'm going to talk about the performance. So from a composition standpoint, I like to critique this because it's original music that I arranged for the field. So I can critique myself, and it's great because 10 years ago, holy smokes. So one of the things I like a lot about this, and it's always been true with my music, is I like texture. I like different textures. And from the beginning, with just having the alto sax quartet to the soloist to then having the full group, there's a lot of textures that happen. That builds into there's no battery at all. They come into the faster section and they start building that. Compositionally, I think that if I was to change that now, I would probably have 4 to 8 less measures in the ballad because I think it drags on a little bit with the music. I think the pacing is a little bit slow.
Okay.
So I think the pacing is a little bit slow. The biggest performance part of that beginning, that ballad area, was that our soloists weren't prepared enough. They didn't execute it at a high enough level all across the board, any soloist or anything. And there's a lot of great musicians in that band. I remember them. So that's a staff thing, but we didn't prepare the soloist. So the execution across the board, there's almost a soloist or something, the whole movement.
Yeah.
And so that hurts the performance part. But when we get to the up tempo, that's where my score increases as well. The last minute and a half is pretty darn hard. I mean, for a high school band, there's a lot of hard material in there, especially on like the low brass part. Mm-hmm. And percussion. The percussion book's pretty intense. But we started seeing more diversity there with the battery coming in, the tuba groove that builds into like this brass feature. I think a lot of that still holds up. But I think the worst thing by far, and I cringed at a couple at them, were the transitions. And that's something that as a designer is a lot harder, I think, until you do it more. But man, there are a couple of real rough these transitions in there that no matter how good that band played it, it just lost energy. There's not very little good about it on the transition side. That was most of the problems I had in the closer, in the final minute and a half. From a performance standpoint, I actually think the music performance is overall pretty good. I think that the biggest thing is timing, which I think relates to feet timing as well, obviously. But ensemble timing, aligning with the battery, that's especially in some of the moments, like it gets a little sloppy. Yeah. So the timing creates an issue, but there's a lot of good balance and blend in that band. Where that was we remember that we wrote that show harder because we got some good folks.
Yeah.
So that's my general take, is that there's the transitions really hurt the musical side of that. But the performance of it, I would give the performance about an equal score as a program on that.
Okay. Where do you think you would put them from a music standpoint?
I would be on the lower box 4.
Okay.
Yeah. I'd probably be close to 75 or 76 between emerging and realizing.
Okay.
There were a lot of really strong things on the musical performance side in particular that would help my score in that. Cool. The demand would play a big part.
Right.
So I would be a little bit higher up. Now, the funny thing is that almost all the score, I remember that year, almost every score we had is exactly what you see. Yeah, our music score was almost always the highest. Our visual score was a little bit lower by usually about 5 to 10 points. And then our guard score was significantly lower. Yeah. That was something we had seen that year.
That's interesting. I mean, that's
something we had for a couple years. That was something that we worked on.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I'm
so desperate to get into the next part.
Me too.
I'm not gonna.
That's the part that we do. Yeah. We do the next. We don't. Where most of us don't function as judges year round. We function as educators that take what judges say, and use it.
So I'm gonna just throw down the gauntlet here. All right, and I don't know. I don't mean for this to be inflammatory, but at the same time, if this offends you, sorry. One of my least favorite parts about Olive Band is listening to judges tapes with people and them getting really worked up and angry. Like, we do that, or they're, just like very defensive actions with judges. I really don't like that. There aren't many things that I'll like speak out about in frustration about the music world, because it's amazing. But I think that's one of the worst things you can do, is just listen to a tape and be like, that person has no idea what they're talking about. That person is biased. Could that happen? Sure, it could happen.
Sure.
My guess is it happens very irregularly. I would assume that it doesn't happen to me. So you've gotten this feedback. Imagine this is your band and you've gotten this feedback about the guard variety and how they're a little bit weaker at the beginning of what we saw today, of the beginning of this part compared to the end, right? From the visual side. What about the pulse control and spatial awareness? How do you, like, that's the info you've gotten that motivates the score. You've heard that the transitions don't really work, but that you do have a good ensemble sound. The question is, for next week, we have all this information now. We have our boxes. We have how we compare to everybody else. We know how much a gap in a score is motivated by the quality of us compared to the people around us. And then we have these actual comments that are on a tape.
Right.
Next week, how do we take that information and motivate that into
how do you make meaning out of data?
Yeah.
How do you take some meaning, meaningful information out of it?
Yep. How do you get good feedback out of that stuff? Yeah.
Right.
That's great.
Yeah.
So this is just kind of the foundations of judging, so we can motivate next week's discussion. So thanks for joining us. One thing I do want to say before we wrap up is we're going to have trivia this coming week.
Yeah.
Yes, we are.
Please join us. It's going to be super fun. It's Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern, right? Did I get that right? Okay. I've got so many thoughts in my brain right now. I wasn't 100% sure. So please join us. Winner is going to get $30 of like swag or donation to
performing group of their choice.
So we want to continue to sponsor the arts. We want a lot of people in on that. It's really fun. We've got some kooky things ready that we.
Oh yeah, we do.
Yeah, it's real fun.
Yeah, I just remembered some of the stuff.
Yeah.
So it's going to be cool.
It's going to be fun. We're going to laugh a whole lot. And then on Friday night, we're going to come back and take all the stuff that we've learned today or that we've reinforced today and talk about how to motivate it into making your program better. So make sure to join us for that. Thank you for listening to us today. It's been a long conversation, but I think it's been a great conversation. We're really glad that you've stuck around. This is fun. If you've got questions, info@musiceffectdesign.com, or message us here on our Facebook page. We love to collaborate. We love to help people with solutions. And if you've got questions about what we can do or like what we can elaborate on to help you, we want to do that too.
Yeah, we're here for you.
Yep. For the three of us and all of us in Music Effect Design, thanks for joining. We'll see you on Wednesday.